Welcome to Lady Law Publishing and the host of Mike and Joe Consulting. Today, our guest is Dharma Chaya, a younger version of me, otherwise a friendly competitor. We both do the same thing from the prospect of two different generations, and we get along great. We have the same moral compass and the same ideas. And we're realizing that there really isn't a lot of competition in this world. There's people that want me because I'm old and weathered, and there's people that want him because he's young and vibrant and exciting. So we're never going to step on each other's toes. Today, we're going to talk about generational communication and the ups and downs, the pros and the cons. And I'm going to start out with a little personal story. We shut everything down. We had a very lucrative business that we shut down in 2020 after 6 years of health problems that I was having, that we figured out after 6 years was really a matter of communication between my healthcare providers, the medication side effects, and communication. So we shut everything down in 2020 because I thought I was going to die. I had 5 near-death experiences, and each time my wife was told he may not be here in the morning. So we shut everything down, and I spent all of my time and energy researching and trying to find solutions. In 2022, I met a doctor who was ready to retire and really didn't care about the insurance companies and his reputation anymore. And he basically saved my life with something I should have been told about 6 years earlier. In 2022, once we decided I was going to live, my wife said, "Well, you better go back to work." And so I thought, you know what? You're right. I've been in business for 40 years. She's been in business going on 40 years and looking forward to retirement. And I thought, what could we do? And I thought, let's start a podcast business, a consulting business. We've got a combined almost 80 years as entrepreneurs, consulting entrepreneurs. So, first thing I did is I went out and found a teenager to explain to me what a podcast was. And within 5 minutes, after spending hours talking to professionals, he said to me, "It's what you've been doing for 40 years. You've been doing radio for 40 years on AM, FM channels. And podcast is just another word for radio. And we're not using AM, FM channels. We're using streaming, Google, and Buzzsprout, and uh, Spotify, and stuff like that." He says, so basically, it's radio by another name. And I thought, well, that's simple. So I got my web designer, my marketing person who's been with us for about 10 years, to research podcasts. She was also familiar with the word, but not really the business. For less than $1,000, we rebranded our existing website, got hooked up with a podcast provider, and started recording podcasts. And for 1 year, our business grew tremendously, more better than we could have ever anticipated or expected. So, at about a year or so, with just steady growth and really promising future, we thought, let's get with the times. Let's rebrand. And there's a lot of young people selling rebranding, website design, SEO services, all these things that we never did before. We had an old basic kindergarten style website that was working just fine. And we had a server of 25 years. I don't care what you wanted to do, my name would come up. And people would actually call and complain that they had no interest in anything I was doing. Why do I keep coming up on their Google searches? which is something that irritates me. I hate to search because I can never find what I'm looking for. I find everything but. So, anyways, my last show was with Dharma here today before we handed over our business to the new, fancy, highly educated, well degreed person that was a website designer. Throughout our negotiations, I was not equipped to challenge her technically, but I'm old and I've been around websites for 25 years. And there were just certain things that did not make sense to me. And I had a sense of disconnect in our communication. So, being old and not too shy, I went overboard with my communication. I asked this young lady if she outsourced her work or if this was her crew. She assured me this was her crew and that she did not outsource anything because I just don't want to outsource to foreign countries that don't speak English and I can't communicate with. So when she convinced me that this was her crew, I went one step further and I said, "Let me get this straight. Please excuse me. Are you married to any of your crew? Have you slept with any of your crew? Have you had dinner on a regular basis with any of your crew? Did you go to school with them? Did you grow up with them? Are they related to you?" Yes, they're my crew. Can't really argue with that. And I can't really guess or anticipate there'd be any communication problem there. She really tried hard to sell me on her server. And I was really adamant about not wanting to lose my 25-year server, my web server, my domain host. And I just got tired of arguing. And my wife and I have always bragged that we can fix anything, any struggling business. So I said, you know what? It's time that we put our money where our mouth is. And if this all goes south, we've been bragging that we have a program called Failure Eludes Me. We can fix any struggling business. Well, you know what? Let's put ourselves to the test. Are we just living off an old reputation? Or can we really still salvage anything? So we went ahead and we paid this young lady $10,000 to give us a new website and to get us up into the out of the Stone Ages. The 90-day project took almost 5 months, and it was a nice site. It was pretty. She was very talented when it came to cosmetics, but there was just something in my gut that told me this wasn't going to work. So on January 18th, Dharma and I did a show. And on January 20th, I turned everything over to this new web designer that we paid all this money to. On January 21st, I could not find myself or my business if I put my name, address, birth date, social security number, and wanted posters up. We went from 10 to 20,000 hits a week to 70. And those 70 were all people that I was continuing to solicit through Facebook and Instagram and social media, which is how I met Dharma over almost a year ago. So instead of panicking and saying, "I told you so," I thought, you know what? Let's work with this young lady and see if we can convince her that we're helpful, that even though we have no degrees and we have no paper hanging on the wall, that our experience is worth something. And so we worked with her for an additional almost 5 months. Never got a search engine hit. Pages didn't work. Things had to be tweaked. Things had to be fixed. And one day I was having trouble with my email. So I called my server and I said, "Hey, Dave, I've been with you 25 years. I've never had an issue with my email." And Dave says, Well, that's nice, Mike. You were with me for 25 years, and that's why you didn't have an issue with your email. Your web designer took all your service to another provider. Okay, I guess I didn't communicate that well enough. So we cut her loose. I got my original web designer, my original marketing person who's been with me for 10 years, who warned me that all this was going to happen. So she had every right to say, I told you so. And I let her say, I told you so. I even invited her to say, I told you so. So $1,000, we had this brand new business up and running and profitable. 10,000 and incidentals, let's say 15,000. We destroyed it all. I mean, done. All it's destroyed. I got rid of her. My young lady that's been with me for 10 years brought my old website up. We brought the old server back. And I'm going to say within 2 to 3 days, we're getting thousands of hits again. We're getting hits from every country in the world. And I could find myself without without a search party. So we're back up and running about 6 weeks now. Things are going right back to where they were. It's like we never skipped a beat. So we can continue to brag after 30 years that failure eludes us. We can solve any problem, including our own self inflicted problems. So I thought it would only be appropriate that because Dharma is much younger than me, and in that category of people I find it hard to communicate with, but I communicate with him just fine. Um, that he would be the most appropriate person to do this show with, the first show since we've come back from our disastrous decline. So, Dharma, um, thank you for tolerating me for this introduction, for coming on board again. And
Thank you for having me.
let, let's talk about our generational differences and why some people your age will never be on track with me, and others your age, we get along just fine and understand each other just fine. So I'm going to let you go with this because I got plenty of opinions that I'll bore you with. So I'll let you take this from here. Everybody, Dharma Chaya, um, supposedly a friendly competitor. We do the same thing. We consult businesses, but he does it from a new age way. I do it from an old school way, and we get along just fine.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, first of all, Michael, I wanted to thank you. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for all your listeners for listening, because this is a very important topic, in my opinion. Everything starts with communication. It doesn't matter if you're in a relationship, in a business relationship, in a family relationship. It's all going to start with communication. And the biggest thing that I find that puts us at a similar understanding of communication is we make sure we're understanding the perspective of what we're talking about, right? So it's important to understand, first and foremost, humans, we don't speak in definition anymore. We speak in perspective, right? So we're always going to have a perspective of a word and how we may perceive that because of our experience, right? So as we present this in our topic of discussion or in our networking, we need to make sure that we are addressing, okay, this is how I see these certain things. Can you understand how I see this? And is this similar to you? Right. There's been a lot of times that, excuse me, Mike, me and you, fortunately, have been able to kind of subconsciously just understand that we're talking about the same things when we say similar words. But one of the frustrations that I even get with my generation is formality of words and how they're created, slang, these types of things. They remove definition vocabulary and being able to speak from definition. And with a lot of the slang, people have their fun words, have their certain things, but I always remind individuals that it's much better to know how to talk by law and with books than to not. Right. So I always encourage individuals that if they want to use their slang, that's great, but you need to know when to turn on the switch and turn off the switch. Right. So the biggest thing in my eyes when it comes to communication, why my generation and this lovely generation that I find is very, very adverse and handles through a lot of very interesting things, although comparatively speaking, the measures are quite different from what things were had to dealt with in the youth of your generation. So there are a lot of differences of experience, nonetheless. Everybody needs to be able to converse in a proactive way if you're going to move in anything. Whatever there's going to be in the world, it deals with humans. And if you're going to be dealing with humans, you are going to have to communicate something. Even if you invent something, you're still going to have to communicate something to someone. So I find it very fascinating because it's always that people speak from a perspective versus a definition. And this is really what has put me down the track of really being cautious with my words, because your words are, they're quite powerful. You utilize words to get your point across. You utilize words to create business. You utilize words to optimize certain things to move in a specific direction, if that specific direction is intentional with words. So, I mean, communication is the end all be all. My biggest thing, what I would love to really put some attention on is how are how is it that we are able to communicate so fluidly and with a mutual understanding with one another and understand one another. And then you find that with others, you'll never be able to communicate with them and it's just a lost cause. I'm curious to understand your perspective of that, Mike.
Well, with this particular young lady, I will never say there was anything devious about her. I will never say there was anything unethical or, you know, deliberate about her. I just think that she falls under, and what we did is we printed out some AI definitions of generational beliefs. Okay, and there are some things that came out in the younger generation that she believes in what she was taught and has gives zero value to experience. Experience doesn't mean anything because it's not in the book. So that was part of our communication problem. We would never see eye to eye because I valued her education and her technical knowledge, but she didn't value my 40 years of experience, trial, and error in this very industry with people before her. She was one of hundreds of people we chose to do business with. She was sharp, she was well spoken, she was very knowledgeable in what she was taught, but she was young enough that she really didn't have any life experiences and she didn't really have a long track record in business experiences. Now, I did do my research, and she had some top name clients, lawyers, doctors, and professionals. But on further research, they weren't exactly technically, or they were technically challenged. So they didn't understand search engines and they didn't understand optimization. My websites have always been optimized at about 97 to 98%. Our This site that she put up for us and her clients' sites were optimizing at about 42%. WordPress, I think it's a wonderful program. I've tried it 6 or 7 times with 6 or 7 people before her, but she seemed to have the credentials in WordPress, which made me go again. If at first you don't succeed, try again. But there was always something that had to be maintained. There was always an extra expense. There was always an extra, oh, we have to do this on top of this, on top of this, on top of that. And I very clearly said, is this something you know well enough that we don't always have to be looking for updating and upkeeping. So um, that was that particular experience. What I'm finding in general, dealing with younger generation now, and I speak at a lot of, uh, until COVID, I was speaking at colleges almost every week. My local college, I had 12 years. I spoke every single um, semester to business students and health and wellness and social behavior students. And one of the questions I asked when I first got into any class was, raise your hand if you're here studying what you want to study, what you have a passion to study, or if you're here because it's the only education your parents agreed to pay for. And I found that the kids that were there studying what their parents agreed to let them study because it was their passion, it was their interest, were so much more dependable, involved, and easy to communicate with than the kids that were completely disengaged, just following orders. And just, I wasn't going to get away from home unless I wanted to become a doctor because that's the only thing they would pay for. So I find that today, when I'm interviewing young kids, I'm not interviewing their skills as much as their upbringing. What did your parents do? What did your parents instill in you? How were you raised? What were you raised to believe in? How do you feel about older folks? How do you feel about um, the old guy that tells the same story 50 times but had 75 years experience? Can you learn anything from older people? If you say no to that and you say I had no discipline, my parents weren't involved in my life, I'm not doing business with you. I don't care how many degrees you have. So I think, Dharma, for you and I, you have a lot of those old world values that you learned from your parents that you've experienced in your life that are, different than mine, but similar in concept. So I think that's the key to the people I'm communicating with effortlessly
Yeah.
is we have some of those beliefs and values.
Yeah, it's very fascinating because the common expressions you don't ride a bike or you don't learn how to ride a bike by reading the book, right? You learn by getting on it and falling and getting on it and falling and then eventually you figure out how not to fall.
Well, and that's the big topic today. As one of the questions I was posed by another person was, would you take your grandchild to a trade school or to a college? And if you could only choose one, which would you choose? And I would choose a trade school, not taking anything away from education. You have to have an education. You have to keep up with the times. But what I find is a big disadvantage for kids today is they're getting paid 150, $180,000 based on 4 years of college with no life experience, no discipline, no practical experience. Now, in my day, you went to college if you were going to be a doctor or a lawyer or a technician because everybody else was an apprentice. You went to work laying bricks. You went to work being a mechanic. You went to work doing whatever it was that you wanted your profession to be. So you had hands-on experience. Now, a lot of people failed in life, even though they were good at what they did, because they didn't have the education. If I had a better education, I would have probably caught the two or $300,000 my accountant stole from me. I would have caught, all the things that the smarter people got over on me with. Thank goodness I was good enough at what I did to overcome those financial difficulties that I wouldn't have had if I had a better education. So I think education, like anything in life, in moderation. You have to have an education, but you also have to have some practical experience, some apprenticeship. You have to get out there and get your hands dirty.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And one of the things that I find quite interesting, right, is that the education industry has never changed. It hasn't changed at all. Every other industry has. Every single industry. So I always find that quite fascinating. And this is where I really see a lot of the transition that's happening right now, why there's a lot of opportunity for growth, why there's also a lot of opportunity for delusion and um, and fallacies, is because we're we're gravitating into a new type of era, if you will. We just got out of the era of information. Now we're in the era of attention, and now we're moving into a era of education, I believe, because the school system has never been attacked, if you will, by another industry. For an example, right? We have taxi. You had all driving services. Then Uber came along, and now anybody and their mother can drive an Uber, right? And you can do it. And now that takes away taxi. So now taxi has been challenged. Airbnb, realtors and rentals and things of that nature, individuals who were renting properties and they were having a whole profession on being the middleman of here's your property and here's someone that's wanting to rent or buy. Airbnb, cut out the person in the middle. And now what we're starting to see is that there's a new platform, but we're also starting to see a lot more of individuals developing communities that are based off education. So I see a lot of it now that this is the time period that I give a lot of hope for, right? And especially for my generation specifically, is because I find that the younger generation really does place experience above the initial learning. They place experience above it, but then it's once they have the experience coming back and learning the things from the rudimentary levels, that's where there's still the hiccup, right? But the aspect of coming into getting an education and getting these things, you're going to be able to develop it in so many amount of ways, right? It's about, I would say, if I was proposed that question, would you recommend education or trade? Like you were talking about earlier in the classes, the first question would be is, well, where do you find more meaning and passion, and what is it that you like to do? Have you ever worked with your hands before, or have you written, notes and you've never even picked up any grease, right? So figuring out, where that person is going to gravitate towards um, in a more driven intention is definitely the most important aspect of it. But both sides have equal amount of opportunities, especially with trades. People are needing it, and you can start your own business, hire out, yada yada. And then with the education side of things, there's tons of people that need what it is that we're providing. But why does this all bring us back to generational communication? And it's because that if an individual that is of the younger generation is speaking to their elders or their parents that are gracefully and gratefully presenting them with a paid education, one needs to understand how to convey and communicate the understanding that, hey, you may want me to become a doctor and it may suit me very well, but where my worry comes in is that I'm not going to complete it because I don't care about it. Being able to convey and communicate with elders and different types of individuals and being able to speak in different types of formalities of language, you're able to actually show people what you mean or what you mean and what you're trying to say. If you if you're in front of your parents, say for the younger generations, if you're in front of your parents, remember it's like anything else in the world. It's a sales call. It's an assessment call. It's a discovery call. It's a deep dive strategy call. You have to sell your point. You have to sell your objective. You have to show them why you are thinking the things that they are, and you have to make it irresistible to go against what you want to happen. Right? This is what people need to share with their parents and with other individuals that they're trying to convey messages to, right? So being able to communicate enough that one can understand, but also to show the meaning and the passion behind what it is that we're doing. And now on a caveat, because I've dealt with a lot of elderly individuals and people that are above the generation of minds and really do care and really want to move in that direction is that I see a lot of the older generations, it's more of now a willingness to reopen up, is because they have experienced so much and they have been through a lot of things and they have done a lot, but then still keeping that mentality of there is still much to learn in this world, no matter what there is and no matter how long I have. There we can learn a lot from the youth and we can learn a lot from the elderly. Right? There is a lot that can be bounced back and forth so that there can be a mutually benefiting relationship. And what I find is for the youth, it's about growing up, not fully, but growing up and speaking your mind and not just subjecting ourselves to what people are telling us, but speaking your mind. And for older generations to open up and not necessarily write off younger people because of their age, but listen to how they speak and listen to what they're presenting and find credentials and find experience to see if it all does add up. So
I think,
with all this coming in back together, I think that, in the realm of all things, when it comes to the generational communication, whether it's education, trade, or anything of this nature, it's really about us remaining authentic, right? And speaking what it is that we know to be true. And we could be wrong, but we know it to be true, and we need experience to tell us wrong. So I think that's my take on generational communication there, Mike.
yeah, absolutely. On both sides, you have to you have to have an open mind, and you have to be willing to admit that you don't know what you don't know. And I think Henry Ford said it best. I don't need to know how to build a steam engine. I've got people who know that. I'll go to them. I'll go to the experts. Why would I want to learn how to do it myself when somebody can explain it to me in 5 minutes? My web designer, my marketing person will never be out of a job for two reasons. I don't know what she knows, and I don't want to know what she knows. Okay. I want to make my money doing what I love to do so that I can afford to pay her to do what she loves to do. So there's never going to be a time when I don't need her, but I respect her and I learn from her. And if nothing else, she learns tolerance from me. Um, she's got four kids of her own, and I'm number five. Um, so yeah, it's just about opening your mind and accepting other people's views based on what they've experienced and respecting what they know and the way they learned it. Like to me, I think the word appointment should be just eliminated from the human language. Appointment means nothing to anybody. When I have an appointment, I'm 10 minutes early. Um, my previous business, I used to travel 2,000 miles a week. My first stop of the day was sometimes 150 miles away from my home. If it was a 2.5 hour drive, I left 3 hours early, giving myself a half hour for a flat tire or getting lost or making a restroom stop. But I was never late, no matter how far I had to go. But today, and I don't even care that you miss your appointment, have the courtesy to call. If you have a 2 o'clock appointment, I think at quarter to two, you're an hour away. You can just call and say, I'm going to be 45 minutes late instead of letting me sit there, not take somebody who might really need my services, and then just sit there twiddling my thumbs, wondering if you're in a traffic jam or if you changed your mind or whatever. So, those are some of the generational things that I'm troubled with when you say definition, living by definition. A lot of words that I grew up with mean nothing to some of the younger generation, like the word appointment.
Yeah.
When people say too many times about their appointment, I just assume they're not showing up. So I'll double book. And I used to complain, why do you double book? You know, I have a 2 o'clock appointment. Why would you book two of us for 2 o'clock? Well, because there's a pretty good chance only one of us is going to show up.
Yep. And Mike, I think it's really important because you hit it on the head of the nail earlier, and I just want to full circle because it ties into this is it's respect. That's the key word. It's respect.
I somewhat agree with you, but I don't even know if it's respect or it's just the way they were brought up. I don't think this young lady was disrespectful.
Oh no.
I think she was just raised to think old people didn't know anything.
Could have
So
been.
it
Yeah.
wasn't a deliberate dissing me for my knowledge. It was just, you're old, you don't know anything, and I have a degree. So
Right.
I know more than
Right.
you.
And the thing that and it's a beautiful aspect. So I'm glad that the topic of today's discussion is generational communication, and let me speak on more on behalf on the term respect. I find that especially in the business world, right? Let's keep the professional hat on for just a moment here. In that the professional world, everybody knows and everyone's seen it as long as they've been in the business world for over a month, but primarily like 2 to 3 years, there are multiple hats with business. And a lot of people unfortunately put on their marketing hat with another hat with another hat. So now they have three compressed hats on at the same time, and they're forgetting that um, marketing stays over here, your experience stays over here, and how you present stays in here. So I think it's more so that people need to have or rather, I encourage to have the respect to themselves. Because if you would be very frustrated if someone wouldn't acknowledge you or tell you to come 5 minutes, 10 minutes early, or they're not making it today, right? We would all want what is done to us done to them, right? So if someone isn't going to make your appointment, one must let them know, hey, I'm going to be 15 minutes late, or I'm not going to make it today, or can we postpone? Can we? Because one is respecting their time and it's transferring to the other individual, right? I will always respect your time, so I will communicate with you. If something comes up that was unexpected and it removes what we had scheduled, I will communicate. I will speak with you and say, hey, my apologies. This is what came up, and this is what is. Are we able to make something work? Right. Always trying to figure out a solution. But once again, I think that's why we had such a fluid um, ability to respect and understand one another is that experience in that side of things.
And the self-respect. I had an interesting conversation with a guy who he's just late for everything. He's always been late. If you want him at 4 o'clock, you tell him to come at 1 o'clock. He'll be there at 4:15. Um, and he jokingly said to me, he says, I'm going to live a lot longer than you. And I said, why is that? He says, because I don't care. I don't get stressed. If I'm not on time, you get all stressed. Where are you? Why aren't you on time? Did you get in an accident? Are you okay? Are you sick? Did you die? You stress yourself out, you're going to die young. I'm late because I don't care. I don't get stressed. I have no stress in my life. And I thought, you know what? Somehow he probably is going to live a lot longer than me. He's not going to be liked by many people, but he's going to live forever because he just doesn't stress about anything.
There's a good and bad to that. I think there's always good stress, and there's bad stress, and there's utilizing stress.
Well, and then there's adjusting to who you hang out with. So,
There's a
if
That's true.
If I'm barbecuing and I say be there at 4, guess what? You're eating leftovers. we're we're not waiting. So it's all an adjustment. It's an adjustment period. Know who you're dealing with, respect
Yes.
who they are, adjust to accommodate them. Hopefully they'll adjust a little bit to accommodate you,
Yes.
because like you said, nothing ever will get accomplished without communication. Good or bad, there's got to be communication. You know, people, I always, I always use the line, "Oh, I'm sorry. uh, Did did I advertise the mind reading portion of my business? Was I supposed to know that if you don't tell me? Or am I supposed to ask those questions?"
Yep. Yep. It's
So,
it's Mike, it's one of the biggest things, and sorry for cutting you off, but it's one of the
yeah,
biggest things with business development and business consulting is to really figure out that answer, right? Is if we aren't going to be able to communicate, I can only know what you've told me. I can only develop what you've shown me, what you've told me, and what I see. So, in order for this to be the most effective thing, and it's something that I always go about and tell individuals, if you can't treat me like your second wife, then we're probably not going to be good business partners.
that's right. I had apartment houses, and the big thing at that time was contractors would take your money and then not show up to do the job. So I had two apartment houses. I needed siding and roofing on both houses, and it was a good summer. So I said to the gentleman, I said, "Listen, I'm going to give you your down payment, but once you start my job, you're going to finish my job. You're not going to go start 5 other jobs and leave me hanging." And he said, "No, no, we don't do that." And I said, "Good. So you don't mind if I put it in the contract that I'm going to dock you $100 for every sunny day you're not on my job, unless you're at a funeral or in the hospital." So they tore down both the roofs. They did one of the house. They tore the siding off. And then he says, "Oh, I've got this emergency." It was a beautiful sunny day. He goes, "I really got to take care of this." I said, "Go ahead." And then 2 days later, "Oh, I really have to." Go ahead. So like 10 days later, he says, "Listen, I got this really big." I says, "Listen, I don't care if you never come back. I've already taken $1,000 off your bill. So take 20 more days off. I'll take $2,000 off your bill. You have a Oh, you can't do that." "Well, yeah, no, there's a contract and you signed it. So every sunny day that you're not on my property, you're I'm deducting $100 off of what I owe you." So he had 3 crews there. But now the problem was, you don't argue with the cook before he cooks your food. Because now I became a babysitter. I know how to do siding. I know how to do roofing. I'm too old and lame to do it. But you're not going to pull anything over. He had 10, 12 guys there, but they were shorting. They weren't putting enough nails. They weren't going to put the soffit around the chimney. They weren't spacing things properly. When you put siding on, you have to have at least a little space between. You can't nail them tight or they buckle. So now I'm running around keeping an eye on 10 guys who are mad at me because I docked their pay. So, sometimes it's a no-win situation. You could be you could be too smart and clever for your own good. Um, so, but we communicated just fine, and
Oh, and the job got done.
the job got done. And I told him in the end, I wasn't going to deduct $1,000 once you realize, but you made it so difficult for me to babysit everybody. I'm deducting it. You should have taken the 10 days off.
And that's one of the beautiful things, Mike, that everybody has the ability when they can get comfortable in this world is you can always negotiate.
Yeah. And it's just a shame that you have to always be on the defensive and always have to figure in what might go wrong. There used to be a day, and I grew up with. I was fortunate. My father owned a business, so all of my associates were 20 years older than me. They were all business people. When my father built his house over a 3-year period as he could afford it, I worked with the bricklayers. I worked with the drywall guys. I worked with all these older guys, and I picked up their values. But I also got to witness the guys that were always looking for a new sucker because they never did what they promised. You know, they never showed up on time. They never completed the job on time. They didn't use quality materials that were promised. So I got to see the best of all the business
Mm.
worlds. Now, uh, full disclosure, I usually save this at the end of my talks to corporations. I left school in ninth grade and I went to work. I failed one class, that was health class. My daughter was born 3 weeks after I turned 17. So I went to work and became a father. When I was about 20 years old, I formed my own um, trade school. I hitchhiked cross country for 2.5 years. I learned how to drive a tractor trailer. I learned how to be a short order cook. I learned how to do roofing. I learned how everywhere. It took me 2.5 years to get from Florida to California, back to New York, and back to Florida, because everywhere there was a job that I didn't know anything about, I took it and stayed a week, stayed 2 weeks, stayed 3 weeks. I stayed in Arizona 7 months. I stayed in San Jose, California for 7 months. I stayed in Louisiana for 2 weeks. We were at a little diner. The guy needed a cook. And I said, you have a place for me to sleep? He goes, why? I said, because I learned how to short order cook last month on my trip. And I stayed with him and was a short order cook until he could hire somebody. And then I caught another tractor trailer and went to another state. So I had my own trade school. I actually did I can't even count how many jobs I actually did from scratch, knowing nothing. Meeting somebody and saying, "Hey, you need a helper?" I learned fast. As long as it's not calculus and but I took a test one time for my GED and the lady said, "How did you figure all that out?" I said, "Experience." How did you figure out how many squares of siding was in that house? Well, you tell me how tall it is and how wide it is. I don't need to know mathematics. I put siding on 200 houses. I know exactly how many square you need,
Right.
you know? And then when you talk about common sense and practical experience, every job I ever did, if I needed 10 square of siding, I ordered 14 because I could always return what was left. I didn't have 12 guys sitting around having coffee waiting for more materials all the time, you know? And my favorite saying now is you can read 10 books about mountain climbing. You're never going to be a mountain climber until you put your foot on a mountain. You can read about brain surgery for 30 years until you cut into a cadaver. You're not a brain surgeon.
Yeah, I
So,
completely agree.
education, it's very important to know when you get into somebody's brain what could go wrong according to the book. But it's even more important to have a little bit of experience to deal with it because the book doesn't always explain what could happen exactly the way it might happen. So I'm a proponent for education, um, hands-on apprenticeship, and keeping an open mind to consider the other person's point of view and where they're coming from and why they think the way they think.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well,
Couldn't
I
have said it
just
better.
thought, what would Dharma say? And I said,
I was trying to think, what would Mike say?
all right, enough of the bro fest.
It's definitely quite fascinating because what topic we really do bring here for it's a very thought-provoking aspect to something that's so important for individuals. Like we've talked about earlier, whether you're in a relationship with a loved one, whether you're trying to develop a new business, or whether you're trying to get a new job, you're always going to have to communicate, right? And you're always going to have to present how you are perceived, how you perceive yourself to the other individuals. And with keeping that open mind, with keeping, theoretical learning and education and practical learning and education, you're able to utilize these different levels of experience and be and present that type of profession or type of individual, or how you want to carry yourself, right? How do you want others to look at you as how you carry yourself, right? People are going to justify you off of your vernacular, off of your posture, off of how you present in real world situations, and also professional situations. So one thing I can say for my generation, um, on behalf of us, is that there is a lot to experience quite rapidly and can be experienced quite rapidly. I think it's important for individuals to understand that just because you're experiencing it through a screen or something to that caliber doesn't mean you've obtained all the characteristics of what it actually feels like. So there is a lot of information at hand right now. There is a lot of experience that individuals my age are able to experience because of the access of certain things. I would encourage individuals to still keep an open, authentic mind with the practicality of doing things in the real world and seeing how they actually work, and just being a good person, right?
Well, I
Being
mean, above all else, education, knowledge, experience, you have to be well intended.
right,
You're
exactly,
never going to
right.
sell something that you don't believe in. You're never going to satisfy anybody that you don't care about. Um, First and foremost, my father raised me to never consider the money, never concentrate on the income or the profit. He said every second you're concentrating on money, you're depriving your client of the best you can give them. And if you give them the best you're able to do with the most sincerity, money will chase you, his saying, money will chase you like a junkyard dog. They will be happy to give you a tip beyond what you would have ever expected. They'll be happy to pay you and refer you. My
Yes,
father said he saved hundreds of thousands of dollars in advertising because the word of mouth was just so incredible. People talking good about him, he was turning work away. And I have to say, after 40 years of being in business and with this new business, we're not promoting. We're doing hands-on groups and we're turning work away without spending a penny on promotion or marketing because we're sincere. And when we deal with people like you, we formed a relationship and we're constantly talking about each other and promoting each other. I don't have to spend money on a newspaper ad. And as a matter of fact, today I don't even put a lot of credit into advertising because it's only what I tell you to say about me.
yeah,
You know, when I read all these things, and I notice I watch advertising for local companies, and when I'm watching TV and they say the kindest, most polite, generous people, I know them personally. They're just the opposite. Their advertising is covering for what they really are. So uh, let your satisfied customers be your advertising. Let every single person you meet and deal with and touch be your advertising.
yes,
You
yes.
know, so uh,
Service.
I don't know about you, Dharma, but I don't want to bore everybody to death. But what I would like to say is Dharma and I had discussed if the interest is there, doing some live real time broadcasting. So we've pre recorded this one. It's going to be on our podcast, it's going to be on YouTube. But if you're interested in getting involved, please contact us. We'll have all of our information up there and tell us you want to be part of the next show and discuss your feelings about the generational gap or any other subject that you find interesting that more people should be talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
So, Dharma, what do you want to give people to get a hold of you or to contact you or
I'm on all social platforms. So if you go on Instagram, Facebook, school, Twitter, it's all Dharma Chaya. You can contact me there, or you can get in contact with Mike, and Mike and I are always pretty close, so we can always get in contact with each other there. But the biggest thing that I really want to encourage individuals is to be the voice, be your authentic voice. As Mike's saying, it can convey even in business, and it may sound like a fallacy if you've never experienced it, but that's exactly why you should try it, is because you've never experienced it. And when you find coming from that authentic approach, you set yourself apart from industries, and that's how you can get turning business away without even paying a dollar on advertisements. So it's definitely something to just put a little bit more meat on, if we will, but also to encourage individuals. Live Q&As, live interaction, and live engaging discoveries can create so many beautiful opportunities, can show a new perspective and show how someone else sees something. So it's um it's something I highly encourage. I would love to actually participate with individuals that have live engaging questions. I think it would be even more exciting. I don't think people would be bored at all. I think it would be even something that individuals would look forward to come together and to be able to express such intellectual ideas and to be able to move forward proactively. So it's definitely something I encourage. And if we're meant to get in contact, we're meant to get in contact.
Well, I'll have all that information at the end of the show and the broadcast. So please do respond if you want to be involved. Q&A is the best. And I just want to say something a little off-handed here about being your genuine self. If you're your genuine self and people love you, that's the way to go. If you're your genuine self and you get a lot of negative feedback, keep an open mind. Maybe there's something you have to adjust. Because there is a group of people out there that just don't like what I have to say and how I have to say it. So at some point, I have to think, is the world wrong and I'm the only one that knows everything? Or do I have to make some adjustments in the way I present myself to attract a different group of people? So be your genuine self, but always keep an open mind, always learn. There's nothing negative. There's no failure. There's only lessons. There's nothing right now you're looking at me. I'm heavy set. I'm bald. You can't offend me by saying I'm fat and bald. I can go on a diet. I can buy a wig, but I can't be offended by the truth. You know, so tell the truth. Try to be polite about it. Um, and you'll find that you won't offend fat bald people by calling them fat and bald if you say it properly.
Mike, you're one of one.
Yeah, thank you. And there's something wrong with you too. Uh, well, thank you, folks, for listening, joining us today. I'll have all the information for you to contact us so we can put together a live, weekly, monthly, bi-monthly, whatever. Um, there's another word for you to look up, Dharma. Bi-weekly, bi-monthly. It
Yep.
means both.
Okay, yes, it
It
does.
means every other or twice. Another confusing communication. On that note, folks, God bless everybody and enjoy and prosper.